If you are a lifelong learner, you know that the most mundane things in our daily lives often hide the most incredibly complex engineering. Take the buffet, for example.
Oh, absolutely.
We have all been to one. You grab a plate, you get in line, and you serve yourself. It seems incredibly simple.
It really does on the surface.
Right. You probably picture it as a casual, all-you-can-eat free-for-all at a family reunion or maybe a hotel breakfast. But today, our mission for this deep dive into the source material is to completely shatter that stereotype. We are looking at a stack of sources detailing the Chapter 37 industry standards for professional buffets. And let me tell you, when you get to the professional catering level, this is not just about, putting some food on a folding table.
Oh, no.
We are talking about a high-stakes, millimeter-precise logistical operation. By the time we are done today, you are never going to look at a wedding reception or a corporate event the same way again.
It really is a complete paradigm shift once you see the mechanics operating behind the curtain. The absolute most critical thing to understand from these standards is that a successful professional buffet requires massive, tightly orchestrated collaboration.
Right.
People tend to think there's just a chef in the back cooking a massive volume of food. But it is actually a synchronized effort between the executive chef, catering sales, the dining room manager, and the banquet manager.
That is a lot of moving parts.
It is. Every single one of those departments has to be in perfect alignment, communicating constantly, or the entire system collapses before the first guest even walks into the room.
Okay, let's unpack this because they actually have a specific industry blueprint to keep all those departments aligned, right? The sources refer to it as the BEO.
Precisely. The BEO stands for Banquet Event Order.
Banquet Event Order. Got it.
You can think of it as the ultimate logistical master document. Every tiny detail of the event, from the exact time the delivery trucks arrive, to the color of the napkins, to the specific dietary restrictions of table 4, all of it is captured in the BEO.
Wow.
It serves as the central nervous system for the entire operation. And within that document, there's a fascinating bit of operational mathematics that dictates how the kitchen actually functions on the day of the event. It comes down to two very distinct acronyms.
Right, the GTD and the pre-pick.
Exactly, GTD and pre-pick.
The GTD stands for guaranteed. So if I am the client planning a corporate retreat, I provide the GTD. That is the exact number of guests I am contracting and paying for.
Yes.
If I say 100 people are coming, I'm writing a check for 100 people, even if only 80 show up.
That is the guarantee.
But the kitchen doesn't actually cook for the GTD. They look at the PREP number, which the sources say always includes a strict 5% overage.
Cool.
So for my 100 guaranteed guests, they prep for 105. But wait, if I am only paying for 100 people, does that mean the kitchen is just intentionally taking a financial hit to prep for those extra 5?
They are, yes.
Why wouldn't they just strictly cook for the guaranteed number to maximize their profit?
It is a great question, and it really comes down to risk management. Yes, the kitchen absorbs the cost of that 5% overage, but they view it as an absolutely essential insurance policy.
An insurance policy against running out of food.
Exactly. Think about the catastrophic damage to a caterer's reputation if they run out of food at a high-end wedding. It is unrecoverable.
Yeah, that would be a disaster.
That 5% buffer guarantees that even if a few uninvited guests show up, or if people are simply serving themselves slightly larger portions of the prime rib than the chef anticipated, the event will never, ever run out of food. It is a mathematical safety net that protects the business's long-term brand over the short-term food cost.
That makes total sense. You are paying a little extra on food costs to ensure you don't ruin a once-in-a-lifetime event.
Exactly.
But the BEO also has to factor in exactly where this food is being cooked and served, which brings us to location logistics. The sources draw a very sharp line between on-premise and off-premise catering.
A very sharp line. They are two totally different worlds.
On-premise seems pretty straightforward. You are operating inside your own hotel or banquet hall. You know exactly where the electrical outlets are. You know the quirks of your own ovens. You have running water, and all your heavy equipment is right there.
Precisely. On-premise allows for a highly controlled, predictable environment. You have home field advantage. But off-premise catering is a totally different beast, and the logistical complexity of it cannot be overstated.
I can imagine.
You are completely outside your comfort zone. The sources highlight that you might be contracted to serve a 5-course hot meal in a museum, a public park, or a client's private backyard. You are essentially packing up an entire commercial kitchen,
A whole kitchen.
putting it into a fleet of box trucks, and rebuilding it from scratch in an environment that was never ever designed for food service.
I can only imagine the nightmare of trying to keep soup perfectly hot in the middle of a public park in October.
It is a massive undertaking.
Hmm.
Think about the infrastructure we take for granted. If you are catering at a historic art museum, you can't just plug 6 heavy-duty hot boxes into a standard wall outlet.
Right, you'd blow the power.
You will blow the circuits for the entire wing. You have to bring your own quiet generators. You have to bring your own potable water if you're in a park. You have to figure out how to transport commercial convection ovens without damaging them and then level them on uneven ground so your cakes bake evenly.
That sounds intense.
It is less about cooking and more about tactical military deployment.
And before they even load up those trucks to head to the museum or the park, the food itself has to be designed with incredible precision. You can't just pick your 10 favorite dishes and throw them on a table. Which brings us to the menu architecture.
What's fascinating here is the psychological and sensory planning that goes into the menu. The industry standards outline very strict guidelines of variation.
Guidelines of variation.
Yes. The entire goal of these guidelines is to prevent 2 specific phenomena: visual boredom and palate fatigue. If you serve a massive group of people a monotonous menu, their overall experience of the event plummets. They will actually rate the event poorly in their minds, even if the food technically tastes fantastic.
So to fight that visual boredom and palate fatigue, the industry relies on 3 unbreakable rules of variation. First, vary the ingredients. The rule is simple. You never serve 2 dishes with the same primary protein. If your menu has 2 entrees, you do 1 beef and 1 poultry, or 1 pork and 1 fish.
Right.
And you do the exact same thing with the starches. You pair a pasta starch with a potato starch or a rice dish. You are deliberately casting the widest possible net to ensure every single guest walking down that line finds something appealing to their specific taste.
And that leads directly into the second rule. Vary the cooking methods. You cannot just roast everything or fry everything.
That would be so heavy.
Extremely heavy. A balanced, professionally designed menu requires a strategic mix of culinary techniques. Our source text gives a really great example of this balance. You might serve a hot, slow-braised meat dish, like a beef bourguignon.
Sounds amazing.
You place that alongside a dry-roasted poultry dish, and then contrast both of those with a cold poached fish. By varying the cooking methods, you are inherently varying the weight of the dishes, the serving temperatures, and most importantly, the mouthfeel of the meal.
Which brings us to the third rule, which is where my brain immediately went to the worst-case scenario. The third rule is vary colors and textures, and the sources point out a very real visual disaster that happens when caterers ignore this.
Oh, the beige food problem.
Yes, just imagine walking up to a buffet and seeing a massive steaming pan of pale fettuccine alfredo placed right next to a pan of pale poached sole, accompanied by a side of mashed potatoes.
It is just a sea of beige.
Exactly. And that makes total sense. If everything on the plate is the exact same monochromatic color, your brain probably registers it as bland hospital food before you even take your first bite.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
We eat with our eyes first. A beige, monochromatic plate signals to the brain that the meal is going to be uninteresting, regardless of how much butter or garlic is in it.
Right.
To avoid that beige landscape, the standards dictate mixing clear, vibrant broths with rich cream soups. You contrast crisp, tossed salads with heavier, bound salads like a potato or macaroni salad.
Yeah.
Every item placed next to another item on that table must pop visually against its neighbor.
It's totally engineered.
The contrast in color and texture is actively engineered to keep the guest's attention engaged as they walk down the line.
Speaking of walking down the line, let's talk about the actual physical geometry of the buffet table itself. Because if you are just picturing a long, boring, rectangular folding table pushed up against the wall, you are way behind the times.
Oh, definitely.
The industry standards move way past the rectangle. The sources mention serpentine tables, which create these beautiful flowing S-curves through a room. They use half-rounds and quarter-round wedges to build entirely custom shapes that fit the specific architecture of the venue.
The physical shape of the table is vital for directing the flow of foot traffic. But what is even more critical is the strict capacity math that governs the setup. The industry refers to this as line math.
Line math.
Yes.
Yeah.
A single-sided service line, meaning guests are only walking down one side of the table, is mathematically capable of handling only 50 to 75 people efficiently. That is a hard limit.
Wow, only 50 to 75.
If your guaranteed guest count hits over 100 people, the BEO will mandate that you absolutely need 2 service lines, either by making a double-sided buffet or setting up a second station across the room.
Which is so crucial for the guest experience. Imagine being guest number 90 in a single line.
It would be terrible.
By the time you actually get to the prime rib carving station, it has been 45 minutes, your feet hurt, the ice sculptures are melting, and half the room is already eating dessert.
Exactly. That is why that 50-person limit is a mathematical law. Add one extra service line for every 50 guests to avoid those bottlenecks. It is literally traffic engineering applied to dinner.
And once you have your lines calculated and your traffic flow engineer, you have to size the physical tables correctly. You cannot just squeeze everything onto whatever tables the venue happens to have in the closet. The industry uses the 1 linear foot rule to determine table size.
It's such an elegant rule.
I love this rule because it is such a clean visual rule of thumb. The rule states that if you have 16 items going on a table, and that count includes everything, not just the food, it includes the stacks of plates at the start of the line, the basket of dinner rolls, the platters of food, the centerpieces, the stacks of napkins at the end.
Everything counts.
If you have 16 items, that table must be a minimum of 16 feet long. It provides exactly 1 linear foot per item.
It is a brilliantly simple standard. That 1 linear foot ensures the display looks beautifully abundant without ever feeling cluttered. It gives the chafing dishes enough room to vent heat safely, and most importantly, it prevents guests from bumping elbows while they're trying to serve themselves with tongs.
But they don't just build outward along those 16 feet, they also build upward. And here's where it gets really interesting. Verticality.
Yes, the vertical space.
You have probably seen those beautiful setups where some platters of food are elevated on pedestals, or maybe they're resting on elegantly wrapped boxes. Those are called risers. And yes, they add gorgeous visual interest and height to the table, but their primary function is actually entirely practical. Risers allow guests to reach the dishes in the back row without dragging their sleeves through the food in the front row.
Or accidentally dripping gravy all over the salad while they pull their plate back.
Exactly. It is a perfect intersection of form and function. By elevating the back row of food on those risers, you completely eliminate the physical awkwardness of reaching over a hot pan. And while the risers provide the structural architecture, the true visual anchors of these tables are the centerpieces. And the industry standards break these down into two very distinct categories. First, you have the gross piece.
The gross piece.
Okay, wait. For those of us who aren't classically trained French chefs, what exactly is a gross piece? And the sources mention it being decorated with a sauce chaud-froid. What is that? We are talking about an edible centerpiece, so is it like a gelatin?
Yeah, that's exactly right. The
Yeah.
gross piece translates to the large piece. It is the edible focal point of the table. A classic example from the text would be a magnificent whole roast turkey, perfectly trussed and glazed, or a massive whole poached salmon.
Ah,
And the sauce chaud-froid you mentioned is a classic French culinary technique. It translates to hot-cold. It is a sauce that is prepared hot, but then allowed to cool.
Yeah.
As it cools, the gelatin in the sauce sets, creating a smooth, pristine, opaque glaze over the cold meat or fish.
so it looks flawless.
Flawless.
Yeah.
It seals the food, prevents it from drying out, and creates a pristine canvas for the chef to arrange intricate decorations made of vegetables or herbs on top. It is food, absolutely, but it is presented with such high artistry that it serves as the aesthetic anchor for the entire display.
That is incredible. So it is a culinary masterpiece, serving double duty as art. And then on the flip side, you have the non-edible centerpieces. And the ultimate showstopper in this category, according to the sources, is the ice carving. The level of preparation for this is staggering.
It really is an art form.
You don't just pull a block of ice from a freezer and start chipping away at it. The master level prep starts with a massive 300-pound block of specially frozen, crystal clear ice. And you can't carve it right away because if you strike it while it is that cold, the thermal shock will cause the entire block to shatter into 1,000 pieces.
Exactly. It requires immense patience.
The sources say you actually have to let it sit out at room temperature for a full hour to temper. You have to wait until the deep white frost completely clears off the outside and the ice becomes beautifully translucent. And only then, once it has tempered, do you attack it with chainsaws and chisels.
The fact that banquet teams are sculpting a 300-pound medium with chainsaws just hours before a delicate high-end dinner service really underscores the massive scale and physical labor of these events.
Totally.
But once the table is set, the ice is carved, and the guests finally arrive in the room, the entire operation transitions from a setup phase into a strict science of safety and maintenance. Maintaining hot foods, hot and cold foods is not a suggestion. It is the absolute non-negotiable law of the room.
Right. And the physics of food holding actually dictate what makes it onto the menu in the first place. You can't just put anything on a buffet. A delicate cheese souffle is going to collapse in 5 minutes.
It would be flat immediately.
You have to choose items that hold well over extended periods of time. Hearty pastas, like a thick tortellini or a penne, are champions of the buffet line because they maintain their structural integrity in a hot pan. Braised meats, like short ribs, are also perfect because sitting in their own juices over a heat source only makes them tenderer.
Conversely, you have to be incredibly careful with your garnishes. The sources point out that delicate herbs like fresh basil or cilantro will wilt, turn black, and look completely unappetizing under the heat lamps or over the steam of chafing dishes almost immediately.
Nobody wants black basil on their pasta.
No, they do not. So professional kitchens substitute them with sturdier, woody garnishes. They use sprigs of rosemary or hardy thyme, which can withstand the prolonged exposure to heat without degrading visually.
And when it comes to keeping that food hot, there is a massive safety alert in the industry standards. There are 2 golden rules of buffet safety that you absolutely cannot break. Rule number 1, you never, ever use a chafing dish to heat food up from a cold state.
That is a critical food safety protocol.
Right, a chafing dish, which is just a pan of food sitting over a pan of hot water heated by little sterno flames, is designed solely to maintain temperature. It doesn't output enough heat to actually cook or safely reheat food.
Never.
The food must already be at its proper internal food-safe temperature in the kitchen ovens before it ever gets carried out and placed into that chafing dish.
And the second golden rule might be even more important for the overall quality and aesthetic of the event.
No.
Never add new food to old food. It is highly unsanitary, and it completely ruins the presentation.
Yes, and the exact protocol outlined in the standards for this is so precise, the 2/3 pan
A
swap.
catering classic.
When a pan of macaroni and cheese on the buffet line is 2/3 empty, you do not just walk out with a fresh bowl from the kitchen and scrape the new mac and cheese on top of the old stuff. If you do that, you are missing the fresh, creamy pasta with the slightly dried out, crusty edges of the old batch.
It looks terrible.
It really does. Instead, you pull that entire pan completely off the line, take it away to the back, and drop in a brand new, completely fresh pan straight from the kitchen. It completely prevents cross-contamination, and it ensures that the guest who goes through the line at 8:00 p.m. gets the exact same pristine, visually perfect experience as the guest who went through the line at 7:00 p.m.
And executing that seamless 2/3 pan swap requires an invisible choreography from a highly trained crew. You cannot have a chaotic staff bumping into guests while carrying hot pans of food. The standards require specific hierarchy on the floor.
Who is doing what?
Well, you have an event captain who oversees the entire room, anticipating the flow of the crowd and radioing the kitchen. You have front waiters whose sole job is maintaining the appearance and stock of the buffet table itself, wiping drips, executing those pan swaps. And you have back waiters who are dedicated entirely to clearing dirty plates and glasses from the guest tables, so they always have room to sit down with their next course. When they're working in harmony, the guest hardly even notices the massive amount of maintenance happening around them.
It is like watching a perfectly synchronized pit stop at a Formula One race, but with prime rib. And what is so wild to me is that this incredibly modern, scientific, geometric approach to dining actually has roots going back hundreds of years.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the historical evolution of the buffet is quite profound. The sources trace its lineage all the way back to the Italian Renaissance with the banchetto, which literally translates to bench, and the French buffet, which originally just meant sideboard.
Just a piece of furniture.
Exactly. But here's the fascinating part. In those early centuries, these massive sideboards weren't even used to serve food. They were strictly designed to show off the host's wealth by displaying their massive, ornate collections of gold and silver serving pieces. The food was entirely secondary to the display of the precious metals.
That is so wild to think about. You get invited over to a duke's palace just to look at a bench full of expensive, shiny bowls. But then the concept eventually jumps across the ocean to America. The sources note that the modern food-focused buffet really started taking root during the 1849 gold rush.
The 49ers.
Right. It was primarily introduced through Chinese restaurant buffets in California that needed a highly efficient way to feed massive, hungry crowds of prospectors quickly.
And then, of course, the concept completely exploded in popularity and scale in 1940s Las Vegas. The early casinos realized they had a problem. Gamblers were leaving the casino floor late at night to go find food.
They didn't want that.
Not at all. They needed a way to keep them in the building, which led to the invention of the famous Midnight Chuck Wagon. It was a massive late-night buffet designed to keep people fed and gambling. That Las Vegas model took the sheer volume and efficiency of the Gold Rush era and combined it with the opulent, over-the-top display of the French sideboard. That fusion created the foundation for the massive hospitality industry standards we see today.
So what does this all mean? It means that the next time you find yourself at a wedding reception, a corporate conference, or a massive holiday party, you are not just looking at a free-for-all of food. You are looking at a perfectly calibrated machine.
A very precise machine.
Yeah. You are looking at precise geometry, advanced culinary science, and centuries of historical tradition all operating in real time. Now that you are armed with this insider knowledge, you are going to spot those risers keeping the sauces from dripping. You are going to mentally calculate the line math and the one linear foot rule based on the guest count. And you are definitely going to notice that invisible front waiter swooping in for the perfect two-thirds pan swap. You are basically going to see the matrix of the catering world.
This raises an important question, though, as we look to the future of hospitality. As we just discussed, the buffet evolved from a French sideboard meant solely to display non-edible wealth, gold and silver, into a centerpiece designed to display massive quantities of edible wealth and abundance. But given our modern society's increasing focus on sustainability and minimizing food waste, alongside a massive shift toward hyper-individualized diets and allergies, how might the physical architecture of the buffet have to evolve next? Will the 16-foot table of mass abundance, with its baked-in 5% overages, eventually become a relic of the past, replaced by something entirely different? It's a fascinating trajectory to consider.
That is such a compelling thought to leave on. The evolution of how we gather, celebrate, and eat is constantly changing, and maybe the buffet as we know it is due for its next big historical renaissance. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We loved unpacking this invisible world with you, and we will catch you next time.